Welcome back, everyone. I'm Yvonne Davis, author, astrologer, and life transformation coach. And if you're new to my channel, I hope you'll subscribe and click like on this video, share with friends and family and on social media, and leave your comments below. So today I'm going to be talking about Mars because today is June 27th, the day that Mars will move into Aries and stay there for over 6 months. There's a lot to talk about where that's concerned. So before I get started, I have to address some issues that came up in my last video. Well, let me just say, I think there's a lot of anger going around. In fact, this video is going to be titled Mars on Fire. Mars is the warrior. Mars is the energy of fire and anger and taking action and boundaries and protection. And it's an energy that we need, but it's also an energy that has a really strong shadow side if that energy is being channeled through a being and activating woundedness, okay? So I'm going to try to talk about that as well. And if you want to know more about this, head on over to my Patreon channel where I do work on consciousness raising, consciousness expansion, talk about the warrior teachings of Don Juan Matus and other transformational modalities. So anyway, like I said, there's a lot of anger going around, and it's gonna heat up with Mars in Aries for over 6 months because Mars rules Aries. So Mars is the god of war. It's a warrior energy, and Aries is the god of war. It's a warrior energy. Mars rules Aries, okay? And so it's like a double fire, double warrior energy. So there's going to be a lot of anger going around for the next 6 months. And, you know, when I got online and I saw the comments on my last video and the anger, I think one jumped out at me more than the others. One said something about I needed to check my facts on the Chaz experiment in Seattle, that they live in Seattle, they know what's going on, and I shouldn't talk about things I know nothing about. Okay, so here's the trick. It's like you can't tell other people how to work with this energy. I can give you some guidelines, and I will tell you how I will do my best to work with this energy, which is let it go. You know, it's like people are going to be getting freaking angry for the next 6 months. I mean, like blistering, raging, lunatic, out of control, blow people's heads off. I mean, I don't like to say things like that, but unfortunately, with Mars in Aries for 6 months, over 6 months, there's just no getting around it. This is the energy of war and violence and fire and anger and rage. And when it's out of control, it can be extremely, extremely violent and destructive. So the key is this: just let it go. You know, I'm going to have to work with that myself, you know, because we're all going to get our buttons pushed in the next 6 months. Every button you have inside you is probably going to get pushed over the next 6 months, and probably multiple times. So what are we going to do? You know, can you just let it go? And I'm not talking about anyone who left a comment on my video. I'm saying me. Can I let it go? Because there's nothing I can do for other people other than share the way that I think is probably the best way to work with this energy, which is to ask myself, you know, can I just let it go and not get angry about things that don't matter? You know, I'm going to get insulted and criticized on my channel all the time. That's something I've had to learn since I started this channel over 2 years ago. And that's a karmic lesson for me, you know. So I'm just sharing you how I work with this energy. And one other thing I just want to say about astrology, because, you know, the viewer said, don't talk about things you know nothing about. One of the things I know something about is astrology. Astrology is a science of pattern recognition, and it's mainly about energy. And so we study the patterns of the energy, the cosmic energy, and how it impacts planet Earth. And so that's something that I do know about. And what I try to do on my channel is to show you charts, which I am going to bring up the Mars chart pretty soon here. And so I talk about like what are the patterns, what's the energy that's going to show up, how might it manifest, and I try to be as specific as I possibly can. And if you watch other astrologers or tarot readers or psychics, what you'll notice is that most of them try to be as general as they possibly can. They try to avoid talking about specific people that it might manifest through, specific locations, specific events. Because the more specific you get, it's like you take this energy and you narrow it down. And the more you narrow it down, the less accurate it becomes. The more broad, and general you can be in your predictions, the more likely you're going to be accurate, So if I just say, yeah, it's an energy of anger, frustration, possible violence, fire, it's going to impact us both on the psychic level, the psychology of humanity and individual human beings, and also earth changes related to heat and fire and anything related to that. So that includes, heat waves, droughts, forest fire, any kind of fire. And then when we get to the fall, it will also include hurricanes. It'll also include floods because it will cause weather pattern disruptions, melting ice, all kinds of things, okay? So the more broad and general I can be in my predictions, the more I will have 100% accuracy. When I try to be specific, which I do that mostly because I want to help people understand the way that this can manifest. So I brought up a suggestion having to do with an event at Gettysburg Cemetery. And then it turned out that this whole thing was apparently a hoax. But personally, I think that is actually part of the unfolding energy. The very fact that it was a hoax is actually a manifestation of the energy of Mars at 29 degrees of Pisces. Pisces is deception. Mars is a violent energy. So whoever was manifesting this Mars energy to try to stimulate violence was doing it through deception. It's a perfect manifestation of Mars in Pisces. So, that's the whole point, is it's not to take me so literally that, if someone doesn't show up knocking on your door at 10:03 a.m. named John Smith, and, slaps you across the face or whatever, punches you in the jaw, that the prediction is inaccurate. It's like, that's just an example. If you know somebody named John Smith, or maybe you don't, maybe you'll meet somebody named John Smith. It's just an example, okay? Don't take it so literally. It's an example of how the energy can manifest. And I'm not completely convinced that something won't go down in Gettysburg Cemetery because that information went out and a lot of people might still act on it. We don't know. We'll, you know, it's like some things you just have to wait and see. There was no way anyone could have predicted the violence would have been triggered by a white man named Chauvin, putting his knee on the neck of a black man named George Floyd. No one could have predicted that. What they could predict was that there was going to be some really intense violence that took place with the June 5th eclipse, and that it relates to the karma of the United States. They could have predicted that. So just trying to help you to understand why astrologers, tarot readers, and psychics have to be really careful about being specific, because the accuracy goes way, way down the more specific you are. And yet it's the way that you help people to understand as examples of how the energy can manifest. Okay. So I'm going to get off this topic because I know a lot of you already know that, and you'll get sick of me lecturing you about that. So just, you know, I wish I didn't have to explain that, but I should probably try to either explain it more often or just not be specific. So let me just say again, the energy coming on the July 4th eclipse, which squares the, I'm going to bring that chart up so I can show it to you. I've talked about it in my last two videos, but it's worth mentioning again. And so this right here is the chart of today. Mars entering Aries today, tonight, June 27th. And this is going to kick it off. It's not just that Mars is entering Aries and will be there for over 6 months. It's also opposite the moon, which will intensify the emotion of anger and frustration. All those hot, fiery energies, emotions are what's getting activated, and it's squaring the nodes, which makes it karmic. Okay, so we all need to take responsibility for our own karma. My karma here is a reminder not to get angry when people criticize me in my comments, not to take it personally, because what good does it do? What good does it do? It does no good at all. It's always going to be there. There's no YouTuber who doesn't get criticized. So that's my karma, is to learn to let it go. It looks like we've also got a T-square to the sun. Yeah. So this is something intense may actually happen today with this kind of energy, or tonight. This is Saturday night after all. So we may wake up to some news about some violence that went down last night. But even if there's nothing exploding on the news scene tonight, just remember for your own personal life that these energies are here to wake us up. And the way to wake up is by looking at what triggers us and just being honest about it, just owning it. It's okay, you know. There's nothing wrong with getting angry. It's a necessary energy. It's what we do with it that matters. Do we do something constructive? Like trying to grow our own consciousness, or do we lash out at the world? Sometimes a little of both, you know. I don't want to get too judgy in here because I'm certainly not perfect. I'm just trying to share the journey of, you know, a real, live, honest person. I'm just trying to do my own work with this. And this is the beginning. This is going to go on for over 6 months because Mars is going to retrograde in Aries on September 9th. And then it will turn direct on November 14th. And then it will leave Aries in early January 2021 and move into Taurus. That is a freaking long time for Mars to be in Aries, and it's not going to be easy. Not just because Mars in Aries in itself is going to be difficult and the length of time it's going to be there, but also the fact that it's going to conjoin Chiron transiting. I'm going to pull it up on the chart of the United States so that you'll be able to see the impact, at least for the nation, but you have to think about your individual self too, if you're interested in working with this energy. So, as I said, the eclipse is going to happen when the moon gets all the way around to Capricorn and opposes the sun in Cancer, and it will at 13 degrees, and it will square Saturn at 14 degrees. And Saturn is authority. So there's going to be a clash with authority. And I think it's probably going to be violent for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is because Mars is in Aries and it's going to conjoin Chiron, which is a place of wounding. And then for the United States, it's going to conjoin the nation's Chiron. And then it's going to station retrograde at 28 degrees where Black Moon Lilith is right now. So this is an indicator in terms of looking at patterns. As I said, astrology is pattern recognition. It's really important that the moment that Mars moves into Aries in opposition to the full moon right over the midheaven of the United States, which is the most public position in the entire chart, squaring the nodes, which makes it karmic, and it's happening just a week before the full moon eclipse. Yeah, I think there's very, very good chance that something's going to happen, possibly tonight. But like I said, even if you don't wake up tomorrow morning finding out that something exploded yesterday, and when I say exploded, again, think in terms of an example of how the energy can manifest. It might be a literal explosion, or it might be an explosion of violence. So, yeah, so this Mars here is going to be very difficult. And again, looking at pattern recognition, the fact that Lilith is here at 28 degrees of Aries is extremely meaningful, because this is the exact position at which Mars will station retrograde. There's something going on here that has to do with the shadow. And this is true both for the United States and for ourselves individually, for every human being on the planet, okay? And because this is transiting. I think this has to do with the youth, honestly, because this is the 5th house, which does rule children. And children, again, is an energy. It doesn't necessarily mean a child, what you might think of as a child, like someone under the age of 18. It means a youthful energy, a childlike energy. And while people might be insulted by that and say, I'm not a child, what I mean by that is it lacks the perspective and wisdom and integration that comes with age. Younger people are much more impulsive, and any of us, who've lived a reasonably long life can probably attest to that, that we were more impulsive, maybe more idealistic, when we were younger. And as you get older, you realize that things go up and down and up and down and up and down. You get perspective. Good times come, then bad times come, then they end, and then good times come again, and then they end, and bad times come again. This is probably, for a lot of us, the worst we've ever seen in our lives, 2020. But that's on a national and global scale. I don't know if that's true of you on an individual scale, because it's hitting some people harder than others. But this eclipse season, with 3 really really intense eclipses and all the other alignments that are happening at the same time, like Mars entering Aries, this has been a really, really difficult eclipse cycle for a lot of people. And that's why, I just feel like I personally just want to try to work with this energy as best I can, because I don't want to make it any worse than it already is. We're going to be in some really hard times, and throughout the rest of the year and into 2021. And I know a lot of times when people come to my channel, they don't want to hear that, but I can't. I'm not a good liar, so I just literally can't. I can't lie. I'm a Sagittarian, so I'm not capable of lying, at least not intentionally. And if I ever do tell a white lie, I know I'm telling a white lie, and I'm doing it, for the same reasons that everybody does it, just because sometimes it makes life easier. So let's see if I want to say anything more about this. I just really wanted to focus on letting you guys know that this Mars energy is going to be freaking intense for the rest of the year, okay? And there's just simply no getting around it. The only thing we can do is work with it as best we can to do our own inner work. And let people be angry. It's going to happen. Our own selves are going to get angry. Other people are going to get angry. And if you can just let it go, let other people be angry, be at peace with your own anger, forgive yourself, and then move on and let it go. I don't know any other way to work with this energy, possibly get into some kind of discipline or practice like meditation, yoga. Any kind of exercise can be really good for burning off that energy. I, for one, am going to go for a long hike today. I'll probably do at least 10 miles today in nature, because the energy is just over the top with this Mars, and it's going to be like that for over 6 months. So some kind of physical or spiritual practice can be really, really good as well. Okay, let me jump over to the eclipse again really quick before I end this video. It's coming up on July 4th, and it crosses over to July 5th. And it's going to be intense. I expect to see violence in this country, sadly, especially with Mars here in Aries, and it's squaring the original eclipse point at 4 degrees Capricorn on December 26th. Understand that all of these eclipses form cycles, okay? So it's like a rotor in a clockwork, and it just clicks things off, okay? So when Mars is squaring that eclipse point, it's clicking it off. It's setting something in motion. It's hitting a trigger, okay? So when we think about it karmically, this is a karmic trigger that takes us back to the beginning of this karmic cycle, which was the December 26, 2019 eclipse at 4 degrees of Capricorn, which was the astrological alignment that corresponded to the first case of the virus showing up in the United States. Okay, these are all these things are connected. It's like dominoes, clicking them off. So, yeah, and then as you can see, Mars is moving into conjunction with Chiron, which is wounding. There's going to be some kind of wounding, or maybe it's more accurate to say it will activate wounding, okay? So keep that in mind, both for yourself individually and understanding other people. Other people are going to be triggered. I don't think I can go into how to deal with that in this video, other than just to say, do your best to let it go. Sometimes you have to stand up to it and set boundaries, but that's more for the kind of thing I discuss on my Patreon for consciousness expansion, because it goes beyond just discussing the eclipses. But again, in terms of, trying to give you some examples of how this might manifest, I do think it will erupt as violence and a clash with authority, any kind of authority, even self-styled authority like a right-wing militia. Where that will happen, I gave you some guesses. I got some feedback that I was wrong. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Probably in Seattle, if they've already disbanded Chaz, then it's can't really, I mean, unless they try to reconvene it or something. But if it's just not existing anymore, then I can't see why it would manifest there specifically. But as I said, I was just trying to give some examples. I gave the example of Gettysburg, and then people said, no, that's fake news. Okay, so maybe nothing will happen there. I gave the example of Chaz, and then somebody said, no, they've been disbanded. Don't talk about things you don't know anything about. Sorry. It's just an example. I also suggested Atlanta because of this thing going around called the blue flu. Some people might think that that's also fake news. Please, please, please understand, these are just examples to help you understand how this energy might manifest. I think it will manifest in the United States. It will manifest as violence. And the full moon will be in opposition or squaring off against some kind of authority, even if it's a self-styled militia, okay? Or it could be some other kind of government authority, the government itself, the military, police, any kind of authority, okay? And I'll stop giving examples on that probably because I don't want people to get too literal around that. Otherwise, as you can see what happens. So I have to be careful about that. Seems to trigger people. All right, so the Neptune square to Mars also, it actually forms a T-square because Neptune is opposite Neptune. As I've said many, many times, this has to do with a reassessment of the values and ideals of our country, and it's squaring off against Mars, which, as I said before, Mars is the warrior energy. So it's the fighter. And the squaring off is definitely people fighting over what they value, what they see as their ideals. Unfortunately, there can be a lot of delusion. Just like an example of this kind of energy can be suicide bombers. There was a rash of suicide bombers at a time in the Middle East. I don't know if they still do that, but and kamikaze pilots are an example of that, where the ideal is so powerful that you are willing to commit suicide in order to fight for your cause. Immolation is actually an example of that too. I wouldn't necessarily call that a delusion. I think most people who immolate themselves actually do understand what they're doing, and they're doing it for a spiritual cause. I don't know what it would take to do something like that. If I had, if I ever had to fight for a cause and knew that it was basically a suicide mission, I think it would have to be for my daughter. I don't think that there's any ideal that I could kill myself over. It would have to be something like saving my daughter's life or something like that, like, taking a bullet for her or something like that. But that's that kind of energy. So there are some people out there who are willing to kill and die and commit violence for what they believe in. But I'm not so sure it's always grounded in the clearest thinking, especially with Neptune involved. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm sure we'll be talking about Mars again because it's just going to be so intense. And by the way, Black Moon Lilith, again, that's the shadow, is going to cross over a fixed star called Agul. which is, and I may have pronounced that wrong. I don't normally work with fixed stars, but it's at 2 degrees of Taurus. And it's one of the most difficult energies. So we got some really, really difficult energy to work with here. And we all have to do our inner work because there's just no other way unless we're going to go around committing acts of violence, even verbal violence against other people. That's probably, you know, if that's the worst of it, then we can get through that. But when people die, when people die, that's the worst of it, because you can't give somebody their life back once it's gone. And property destruction can be very difficult for people as well. But in terms of, you know, like kind of scaling it, I would say verbal is difficult, but we can get through it. Property damage is hard for the people who suffer the damage, but loss of life is the worst, because you can never give someone their life back once it's gone. But if we can all learn how to work with this energy to make it productive and creative, it can be an incredibly, incredibly powerful, motivating energy when we're using it in a creative, constructive way. So again, we'll be talking about this more because it's going to be there for over 6 months. So I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to keep working on trying not to get triggered by comments in the comment section. But again, I'm human. I'm just doing my best like everyone else. And there I go out of focus again. This camera's driving me nuts. All right, so I'm going to stop there. Have a wonderful